On episode 493 of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, we meet Matt Frazier and Robert Cheeke and discuss their book, The Plant-Based Athlete, a game-changing approach to peak performance. You can find the full show notes for this episode at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/493. Have you decided you're ready to make a change? To reclaim your health and fitness? The 40 Plus Fitness Podcast is here for you. I'm your host, Alan Meisner. I'm an NSAM certified personal trainer with a specialization in corrective exercise and fitness nutrition. Let me be your coach as you find your way on your health and fitness journey. All right, let's go. This episode of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast is sponsored by Haka Life Nutrition, the maker of GLX-3. I am really glad to have Haka Life Nutrition as a sponsor. Omega-3 is one of the few supplements I take regularly. But even with years of experience and having interviewed hundreds of experts in the health and fitness field, I have struggled to find a great solution until now. We all know farm-raised meat doesn't give us the right balance of omega-3 to omega-6, and that omega-3 helps reduce inflammation, which reduces joint pain and is heart healthy. Getting enough omega-3 isn't as straightforward as it should be. From the mercury in the fish to poor production controls, it's really hard to find a high-quality product that gives you what you're after. That is until GLX-3. Made from green-lipped mussels from New Zealand, this is the only natural source of ETA. I'm not even going to try to pronounce the full name. This version of omega-3 is particularly effective at reducing inflammation and therefore reducing joint pain. That's why my wife is taking it now. I take it for heart health. Go to hakalife.com/40 plus and use the discount code 40 plus to get a buy one, get one free deal on your first order, which gives you a 2-month starter supply. GLX-3 is my go-to omega-3 supplement going forward. It can be yours too by going to hakalife.com/40 plus and be sure to use the discount code 40 plus for the BOGO deal. Hey, Raz.
Hey, Alan. How are you today?
I'm doing good. We're getting close to getting Lula's wrapped up and open, although we won't really open until probably October. Mm-hmm. But at least the work part will be done. The place will be cleaned. It'll be ready. And then, that just means, not as much dust.
Yay, that's so exciting.
Yeah, and then we'll have our little owner suite area down there, so a little more space for us because we've been staying in one of the rooms, so it's just a room and a bathroom. So, probably less than maybe 200 square foot, just a standard hotel room with a bathroom.
Oh, boy.
And so we'll be moving into a little suite that we'll have downstairs, so that'll be nice. And then going to fence in it's basically concrete because we don't really have a yard, but fence in the area around the back so the dogs have kind of area that can roam around and run and not feel so stuck. But so it'll be cool. And then that'll be separate from where the guests would stay. So I have our space, they'll have their space. And
wonderful. Can't wait to see it. I have to come down and visit you sometime.
Yeah, you need to. You and Mike. You can bring Mike.
Thanks. I don't travel well. I need a travel companion.
All right. So you ran a long race.
I did.
53 miles.
It was, ran a little long. It was the best experience. Definitely a huge challenge, but so very rewarding. It's surreal. I still am kind of on cloud 9, actually.
Well, good. Then that means your legs aren't hurting nearly as bad as mine were.
No, I felt pretty good.
Yeah, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago when we went into recovering from injury and illness, and while in a sense you didn't injure yourself at all, and it's not really an injury. I mean, an illness as we would go, but this is a situation where you're doing post rehab, post healing. You're taking it easy, if you will, but you're not stopping because I saw you also did a 5K.
Yeah, I can't sit still for very long.
Well, I did a recovery run, 5K the next day. So I mean, it's not unheard of. It's just you probably felt you didn't have the spring in your legs that you would normally have. And
Right.
you're working on doing some things to recover that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. So right after we finished the run, it was about 2 a.m. because we started at noon. We finished in just shy of 14 hours. So it was about 2 a.m. or so. And on the way home, I drank a lot of water and finished my hydration, that electrolytes that I had in my pouch, and finished up a snack I was working on. And when I got back, drank a little bit more and went to bed. And the next day, we went to do some more sightseeing. We took some friends to a special part of Michigan up at Mackinac Island. And so we had a short drive to get there, and we walked a lot around the fort, and we did a little bit of sightseeing on the way home. So a little bit of driving, a little bit of walking, and just kind of kept loose that way. And that felt really good. So we did that for about 2 days, actually, after the run, and continued with a lot of hydration and a lot of good protein, healthy protein.
Well, good. So what's next for Rachel Everett?
Yeah. Well, what people should be doing after a big race like this is what I call a reverse taper. So since I didn't have too much carnage, my legs were not too shredded after that race. I'm in pretty good shape. So I'm going to do a lot of walking and a little bit of running. And so it's exactly what it is, a reverse taper. So I might aim for maybe 10 or 12 miles this week, and maybe 15 the next, and maybe 20 the next, and just kind of ease my way back into running. It'll be an every other day kind of thing. I won't be running every day. I'll be walking a lot in between. So it's just easing back into a basic foundation of running again.
Okay. And your next long race?
It could be another 50 miler.
Are you hooked?
No, I do have a 50K. So I'll be running a little over 30 miles in October. And then I might be planning another 50 miler, or maybe 100K, which is a 60 miler. So we'll see. We'll see what I can squeeze in.
Yeah, a 50K works out to a little more than 31 miles, and a 100K works out to a little more than 62 miles. So.
Yep. And then you never know what the race decides to throw at you. So with this 50 miler, we actually started at the 48-mile mark, because it's a 100-mile course. So we started at mile 48, which anybody can math that out. We're going to have 2 extra miles to get to the 100-mile finish line. So yeah, races like to do tricky little things like that. So yeah, beware.
You had fun, right?
It was a tough day, but a wonderful day, and a lot of fun too. It was great to run with my good friend Krista and my other wonderful friend Patrick. He was ahead of us, but he did great too. And it was just nice to see all these people doing amazing things.
Cool. Well, let's get Matt and Robert on the phone.
Sure.
Matt Frazier is the founder of No Meat Athlete and the author of the best-selling self-published No Meat Athlete cookbook. He is a marathoner and ultra runner from Baltimore whose life as an endurance athlete changed when he found that he could run longer and faster on a vegetarian diet. Robert Cheeke is an American bodybuilder, motivational speaker, and author. With no further ado, here's Matt and Robert. Matt, Robert, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Thank you, Alan. Looking forward to talking.
Thank you, Alan.
I've been in the health and fitness field for over 6 years, and it's been fairly common to hear on the endurance athlete side where many of them are going plant-based. It's almost as I said earlier, hand and glove thing that they feel better, their inflammation's lower, and they perform really, really well. A lot of plant-based athletes are some of the best endurance athletes on the planet. Bar none. And you profiled so many of them. But I think what was really cool as I got into the book is you didn't just stop there. It's like, okay, yes, this is great nutrition for the endurance athlete, even the extreme endurance athlete. But you went into bodybuilding and you went into Olympic sports, and you even threw in a pro wrestler, which, if you watch them, they're very athletic. They've got to do some pretty crazy things and hold a lot of muscle mass. So,
exactly.
the plant-based diet has come a long way in that we now understand from a human performance perspective that it is a nutritional strategy that works very, very well for a lot of people. Can you talk a little bit about why plant-based might be the route you want to go if you're looking to improve your athletic performance across the board?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. That's a great question. I'm so glad you asked it because I interviewed 60 world-class athletes just for this book, The Plant-Based Athlete. And one of the things that I came across was that there was a common theme here. All of these different people almost all of them came from an omnivorous eating pattern before. A few of them were actually vegan since birth, which is another topic we'll get into because some are Olympic athletes as a result. But the fact is, dozens and dozens and dozens of athletes all shared the same thing, that they saw their energy go up and they saw their recovery get better. They saw a decrease in inflammation and they sped up their recovery process, which improved their performance. So whether it was a world champion boxer, an Olympic skier, a world-class powerlifter, or a marathon record holder, they experience the same things. And one of the things that's really, really exciting is that I come from a bodybuilding background. Matt comes from a long distance and ultra running background. We have different body types, different sports. And what we found was that the same diet, the plant-based diet, high in complex carbohydrates with modest amounts of proteins and fats from good quality whole food sources, supply the nutrition required, whether you're a bodybuilder or an endurance athlete, or whether you are a NHL hockey player or NFL football player or NBA star like Chris Paul and Kyrie Irving and DeAndre Jordan and JaVale McGee and go down the list, or you're an Olympic figure skater. Because a plant-based diet naturally gives you energy. It's a very high energy diet. It is easy on digestion. It's low calorie, but high nutrition. So high nutrient to calorie ratio. And it is super anti-inflammatory, and you're not eating pro-inflammatory foods. So you reduce inflammation, you recover faster, you improve, your endurance gets better, your muscle soreness often gets reduced, and you just continue on. And one of the great byproducts of that is longevity. Some of the athletes in the book are in their 50s, almost 60, and competing at world record pace. Like Rip Esselstyn set a world record at age 59, I believe, in the 200-meter backstroke in swimming. John Joseph is competing right now, like maybe literally next weekend or within weeks, at another Ironman triathlon, full Ironman distance at age 59, almost 60. Fiona Oaks has multiple Guinness Book World Records in marathons, and she wasn't even supposed to run in the first place because she was born without a kneecap on her right leg and was not even supposed to run, and has set multiple records. And she's in her 50s. Christine Vardaros in her 50s. So many athletes are 40 plus and still performing at a world-class level. And I'll have to be honest with you, Alan, to me, now in my 40s, that was one of the most exciting things for me to read about, to connect really emotionally with Rich Roll, Scott Jurek, Brendan Brazier, John Joseph, Rip Esselstyn, Christine Vardaros, and Fiona Oaks, just to name some of them. It's just so inspiring to me that the benefits of a plant-based diet have contributed to incredible longevity in addition to athletic success, whether it's strength, endurance, power, whatever your sport is, the benefits are there to be had.
Yeah. And we've always thought of those. It's so funny. We've always thought of those as three completely separate things. You train very specifically for your sport. And, so you're not a power lifter out there doing, 30-mile distance runs on the weekend just to, get your miles in. You train very specific for your sport. And so we've always just assumed, okay, well, you're going to have to eat very specific to your sport. And the eating now, as I'm kind of wrapping my mind around the book and everything that was in there, was we're looking to lower inflation in the body. And we're looking to give it the nutrition that it needs to heal well. And with it healing well and not having the inflammation, you're therefore able to train harder and longer. You recover better, and you perform better.
And not to mention the longevity benefit, right? Like you mentioned inflammation, you mentioned healing your body, healing your cells. That's what preserves you as you get older too. So it's amazing that you have these three different sport disciplines and the longevity benefit all from the same thing. And in fact, it seems that it's the same exact mechanism. Really, it's recovering faster and it's having lots of nutrients in relatively few calories compared to other diets. and it makes it easy on your body.
And one of the things, it's funny because if I said the word vegan or vegetarian to somebody, they immediately know what it is. Okay, I'm going into the produce section when I walk in the grocery store. They just know they're going to be at the farmer's market. They're going to be in the produce section at their grocery store. And so, in a sense, I think those two diets, more than most of the others, maybe paleo, but those diets more than anything else kind of drive you to better food quality.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's all there is. I mean, I probably spend 80-90% of my time in the produce section. You know, the number of packaged foods I bought that actually are in a box is so few now. It's maybe pasta. Sometimes I buy things in cans, but even that you get from the bulk food. So yeah, that's one of the great kind of thing. It's been like a journey. I've been on this for 12 years now. And every year I get a little bit better at eating more and more real whole foods and less processed foods. You don't need to be plant-based to do that. Like you said, you could be eating a different diet. Paleo will sort of encourage that move towards very whole foods. And in the book, The Plant-Based Athlete, in fact, we write a couple of pages where we talk about how much paleos and plant-based have in common. We're the weirdos out of a big group of people, the ones who insist on eating whole foods, not from packages, don't eat dairy. We disagree on the meat, but they're more alike than they are different. So yeah, lots of diets can push you down that road, and that certainly plant-based diet does do that for you.
Yeah, and I've interviewed now well over 300 people for this podcast, and it's kind of, that's the thing that when you say why is your diet better, well, it's whole food. That's okay, and that's it. That's actually why it's better in most cases. This episode of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast is sponsored by Haka Life Nutrition, the maker of GLX-3. You know the benefit of omega-3, reduced inflammation, which helps with joint pain and heart health. And you know you're probably not getting enough from your diet. But then you read about the mercury in fish, or how the fish oil supplement you bought at Costco or Walmart might be oxidized and rancid. Not good. Then you look into a plant-based solution and find it isn't very bioavailable, or krill oil, which is much more expensive and isn't really sustainable. GLX-3 is very different. It's from sustainably farmed, green-lipped mussels in New Zealand. The 17 omega-3s found in green-lipped mussels include ETA, which is not found in any fish oil. What is ETA? Not to bore you with the science, but it has been shown to be very effective at reducing inflammation and pain. Haka Life Nutrition has paired this oil with New Zealand olive oil and vitamin E to make a very unique omega-3 supplement. I think it's brilliant. Mussels are at the bottom of the food chain and have a short lifespan, so they aren't as susceptible to mercury contamination. And they don't starve out other species when they're farmed in open water. Haka Life Nutrition is meticulous about their sourcing and encapsulation of GLX-3. Each bottle is traceable all the way back to the place, date, and time of harvesting to ensure you get the best quality omega-3 product on the market. They offer a full 90-day guarantee. Go to hakalife.com/40plus and use the discount code 40plus to get a buy one, get one free deal on your first order, which gives you a 2-month starter supply. GLX-3 is my go-to omega-3 supplement going forward. It can be yours too by going to hakalife.com/40plus and be sure to use the discount code 40plus for the BOGO deal. One of the things I think someone's going to be concerned about is they go over, and they see the kale, and that scores very well as a high nutrition, low calorie density food. Of course, then there's cruciferous vegetables, all the leafy greens, all of that. They're always going to wonder, am I getting enough protein? Now, I know myself that there's protein in all of that in various ways, and you can pair it together and get all of the amino acids you need. But can we talk just a few minutes about why a plant-based diet and how a plant-based diet can provide the protein needs, not just for a normal person walking down the street, but we're talking professional bodybuilders that are trying to put on, 10, 20 pounds a year as they're bulking up and becoming these great athletes that you see on the stage. How can they get their protein and do that? How does that work?
Yeah, Alan, well, first it starts with the fact that plants have all the essential amino acids that we need. The amino acids are the building blocks of protein. You eat a variety of food, you're going to get the amount of amino acids you need and the amount of protein you need if you consume enough calories based on your real calorie needs. That's the big thing, right? So if you're a figure skater weighing 105 pounds, you're going to have different protein needs than a power lifter who's 240 pounds. And so you have to understand, and I like that we talked about that a few minutes ago, Alan, is that it's the same, it's essentially the same diet for all sports. It's just a different calorie intake and maybe a slightly different macronutrient breakdown, a little more protein here, a little more fat here, a little more carbohydrate here, depending on the type of sport. But it's the same diet. It's still sweet potatoes and blueberries and lentils and oats and potatoes and kale, like you mentioned, and walnuts, and it's all the same foods. It's just getting the right quantities. And so for protein, you can eat more foods that are considered more protein rich, like nuts and nut butters and tofu and other soy foods, and legumes tend to be a little bit higher in protein, though still very much a carbohydrate food, beans and lentils and such, and some leafy green vegetables. But there's also some tricks you can do. I mean, everybody knows in different types of athletics that you can do things like smoothies, right? You can put nut butters in smoothies. You can put a bunch of greens in there. You can even, believe it or not, we mentioned in the book, you can even put like tofu or white beans in smoothies because you're adding raspberries or blueberries or peanut butter and chocolate, and you're giving it a flavor that is enjoyable and palatable. Well, it's packed full of imagine if you just put it in a bunch of pumpkin seeds or cashews or, whatever nuts and seeds are your favorite, or you use a powder supplement if you want, but you can do it totally whole foods. And so a smoothie is a great way to add extra protein if you like. You can also just make a conscious effort. So let's say you're having oatmeal. Well, why not put some walnuts on it? Or something else that's, protein rich, with your oatmeal. If you're having a salad, why not put garbanzo beans all over it, in addition to the leafy greens and the peppers and the mushrooms and, whatever else you have in your salad? Why not add some of those things? One thing I like to do, even just with a rice and vegetable dish, is add cashews on top, add peanuts on top sometimes, other nuts. And so you can make this conscious effort to get a little more protein here and there in very tasty, very accessible. I mean, a peanut butter sandwich is as simple as it gets, right? It's not difficult. And one of the messages I really like to make as clear as possible is that if you know what your calorie needs are, and you can use the Harris-Benedict calculator, Harris-Benedict equation to figure that out, and use Chronometer or MyFitnessPal to determine what your intake actually is. If you meet your calorie needs, you are almost absolutely sure to reach your protein needs, because nobody, not a single person eats only celery or only grapefruit or only oranges during the day. We all eat a variety of stuff. We all eat to some form of variety, maybe a little bit of legumes here, a little bit of grains, a little bit of fruits and vegetables and nuts, seeds, or omnivores, some meat or dairy, whatever. We all eat a variety, and that's how you get the amino acids. And then your body pools all those amino acids and uses them throughout the day. You don't need to have complete protein in a single meal. And because we don't do anything in a single meal, you don't reach all your nutrient requirements in a single meal. You don't reach your hydration requirements in a single meal, or your fiber intake in a single meal. Very, very rarely. It's the accumulation of everything that we consume throughout the day and on an ongoing basis, on a weekly, monthly, yearly basis. And so that is how you reach your protein needs, by having adequate calories based on what your calorie needs are, finding foods you enjoy, and then eating them on a regular basis and seeing the results.
So if someone was training, let's just say for one reason or another, they do find that they're doing this heavy training, they're trying to accomplish something special, and they're not quite getting there. Would protein be one of the things that they should maybe take a look at just to make sure that they are hitting that? Or do you just really feel if they're hitting their calorie needs, it's done?
Yeah, you could take a little bit of close look at protein, but I really don't think it's as big of a factor as people think. I think it's the total calories. And also you have to look at the other aspects or baggage that comes with any kind of macronutrient or foods that focus on a singular macronutrient. And so what you can find is the benefits actually of complex carbohydrates, or an increase of complex carbohydrate intake, is that you might find more anti-inflammatory properties there. You might find foods that help with aiding in recovery there. You can focus more on things like turmeric and ginger and tart cherry juice and beets and nitric oxide rich leafy greens, and you can find some increased circulation and increased blood flow and increased nutrition to cells throughout the body. So there's other things besides just that one macronutrient that I think are worth considering, even when you are that bodybuilder or power lifter who's looking for that little edge. I really don't think a few extra grams of protein is the key. I think you have to look at it holistically in its totality, and you look at the utility of all the other aspects, all the other components of nutrition. And you could even say something as simple as this, like, well, if they would have just had a little bit more caffeine, maybe, in supplement form, they would have had more energy to get the lift better, and got stronger and built more muscle. Or if they would have just, used this, for anti-inflammatory properties and had reduced soreness, they could have pushed it a little further. So there's, a lot of different ways to look at it. And I really, after doing this for a quarter century, I just don't think it's protein alone that needs to be the focal point here. What if they would have got a little more sleep, rested a little bit better, and nutrition can help with that, or had better digestion, those kind of things. So, and Matt, I'd love to hear your thoughts on expanding on that.
Yeah. The very first thing I would look to is total calories. I encounter a lot of people who try plant-based diets and they come back a month later and say, well, I did it for a while, but then I didn't have the same energy. And the thing is that it's so easy. If you're really thinking about this carefully and you're looking at all the nutrition, the macronutrient numbers, like Robert has suggested, then you're not going to run into this problem. But a lot of people who just dive into something new, this, by the way, is one of the reasons I really like gradually starting something new. And that's how I went vegan. It was over the course of 4 years, actually. But people, they just remove the animal products and they don't think about replacing it with fairly calorically dense sources, because lots and lots of plants are not calorically dense. And that's a great thing for the most part, because they have lots of nutrients and relatively few calories, like I mentioned earlier. But if you just replace all the meat and dairy and everything with leafy greens, for example, you could drop 30% of your calories from your diet. And so, like, I think more often, especially for people who are new, that's usually the bigger problem. They just didn't eat enough calories. I've got 2 young kids who do this. They're both athletes. My son trains, he puts in, 20 training sessions a week, it seems like. He's crazy. And I just don't think about protein with him. We eat so many whole foods, like you mentioned earlier, Alan, like so many vegetables. And I'm confident that protein is in all of these things. And he eats almost entirely whole food. So I'm not worried about, the processed foods that have the protein removed, like a bunch of added oils or processed sugar. So, I just don't think about protein. I think about calories. I'm always urging him to eat more calories. But protein is really one of the last things on my mind. It's about getting the fresh stuff that I know is going to help him, the antioxidants, the anti-inflammatory compounds, all these things are going to help him recover for that next workout. And protein is just one of many things.
Yeah. And I think, again, that was the kind of the takeaway here, was that as we look at these things, we can fine tune them. And you guys do a great job as you went through the book of looking at, okay, let's look at protein, let's look at fat, let's look at carbs, they're in there, and just recognizing that we can get all that we need from them, and, kind of push this way and that way a little bit to fit our needs. But beyond that, there are some things that as a vegan, we're just not going to get. We're not going to get the B12 because it's just not in any plant-based food. A lot of folks that go vegan also have some issues with their vitamin D. And there's a few other supplements that you talked about in the book. And I think it might be also worth talking about lysine, because that is one of the amino acids that's not as common in plant foods as it is in animal-based foods. Can you kind of talk through some of those supplements and considerations for those?
Yeah, I can take a shot at that. So I actually have a supplement company, and I'm only saying this not to advertise, but to make a point that we make a vegan supplement, and it's actually has 7 nutrients in it. And people think, well, you got to get there must be something wrong with your diet if you have to get those 7 nutrients. But we made that so that we didn't have to take this full mega dose multivitamin that I was taking before I went plant-based. Because, a lot of people do that sort of mindlessly, just pop a multivitamin to cover all the bases. But as I started to think more about food, and as we talked about earlier, start gravitating more towards whole foods and thinking more about what I was eating, I realized that I was getting tons and tons of these common vitamins, because they're in so many different fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, grains, beans. Those things are loaded with micronutrients. So I said, I don't need to be overdosing on all these, I don't need to be taking mega doses of these vitamins. So we made a more mindful supplement that doesn't have all those. It's called Complement. And because the idea is like, it's a complement, it's not a supplement. It's something less than that. But the point is, like, I think vegans who are eating varied diets, probably need to supplement just as a whole less than someone who's eating a standard American diet. You're not going to have tons and tons of areas where you might be running into trouble. Now, there, as you said, there are some things that are actually, like B12, for example, can become a serious problem if you don't supplement it when you're eating a 100% plant-based diet. I'm not at all trying to deny that. And that's why we have this, that's why there's this reputation of, a plant-based diet, must be incomplete or unnatural if you've got to supplement it. For me, I just look at the empirical evidence. You look at the long-term studies on people who live the longest without health problems, the longest health span, the best number of active years. And if that's a plant-based diet plus a B12 supplement or a B12 and a few other things supplement, then, it doesn't matter to me at all whether or not that's quote unquote natural according to someone's theory. I'll take the diet that helps you live the longest, even if it means I have to take a supplement with it. So that's where I come out on it. As far as lysine, you mentioned that one. That's a great point. And that is a nice bit of nuance that, like, you should think about as you think about protein. People know that as the limiting amino acid on a plant-based diet. And the idea is that, like, you actually don't have to worry about protein at all as long as you're meeting your lysine needs. Because if you're meeting your lysine needs, by default, you're going to be getting plenty of other kinds of protein. But lysine is just one that doesn't show up in all that many plant-based foods. And if you want to supplement with it, if you want to go take a protein powder, that's a very, very easy solution to make sure you're meeting your lysine needs. But you don't have to do that. You could also go to more of a in-between way where you're eating some, say, seitan, which is like a wheat gluten that people use to make a lot of meat substitutes out of. I actually love the taste of seitan. I know Robert doesn't like it that much. He said it gives him digestive problems, I think. And a lot of people don't, but a lot of people do. And it's more and more common these days as the meat substitutes are showing up all over the place in grocery stores and fast food restaurants and everything. So that's loaded with lysine. So is tofu and tempeh. Those are two also, like, kind of halfway processed foods, although I don't really even think of those as processed because they're so nutritious. And then if you wanted to, like, really be pure about it and say, I'm just not going to take anything processed or supplement, you can get it by trying really hard with lentils, with quinoa, with amaranth. I mean, it's in foods. It's just, you got to be more mindful the more and more you're kind of insisting on the purity of 100% whole foods.
Yeah, and Matt, you said something I think that was really important there. This is also about being mindful. It's about knowing the food that you're putting in your mouth, and thinking about it, not just eating what's there. Actually saying, okay, I'm gonna have a plan. I'm gonna know what I like, but and I think for a lot of people, we tend to eat simple. I think most people actually do. We probably pick 5 or 6 meals, and that's that's it. That's 90% of the calories that we're going to get are going to come from just a very small select foods. But I think as a vegan, you really have to be mindful about the selection and the organization just to make sure you're getting the calorie load, because it is very easy to say, okay, I'm going to have this big salad. And I may throw some beans and nuts on it or something like that. But you still, to get the calories you need, you kind of need to have a plan. And once you have a plan and you know what you like, you guys have broken it down. I think Robert has his three R's, the threes.
Yeah.
Okay, for the shopping. And I think, again, it's just the better you lay these things out. And you guys do a great job in the book of giving some structure. If someone is considering transitioning to vegetarian or vegan, you give them a very good structure to say, okay, here's how you can structure your meals so you can make sure you're hitting your bases. And again, we're not just talking about the everyday vegan, but it works for them and it works for somebody who's also focused on performance, because you don't necessarily want to take a couple seasons off to get your nutrition right. You're doing this on the fly. So do you guys mind talking a little bit about meal planning and then your approach to shopping for food to make sure that you're getting the variety to hit all your buttons and bases the way you need to?
Yeah, Alan, I think it's a good, I think it's an interesting thing. You talk about mindset or being mindful about it, because I think it's a common idea that we've got to have this mindful approach to plant-based eating, and I think it's obviously good to have a plan, but it's also, I think if we think about it, most people are not super mindful in general. It's that there's a fast food restaurant on the corner that's I'm craving something oily and salty and meaty, and I want to shake with it as well, and then maybe have some pizza later on, or I want some cheese on this or that, and we could probably be more mindful there, with fountain sodas and with standard American diet food. And so I don't want to say, across the board, we have to have just, elevated levels of mindfulness with plant-based eating compared to where we're coming from with pizza.
No. And I didn't mean that at all. What I meant was that I think where most people approach this way of eating is that a lot of people are doing it for not just selfish reasons of saying, I want to feel better and perform better. No, they're actually, they have some more emotional ties to how we're handling our meat production and a whole, eating something with a face concept. And so I think, a lot of people are going at this saying, I want to be a more responsible, ethical person. And so I'm going at it for those ethics reasons. And so I think they're already starting from I need to be mindful of this. And then that kind of balances into so now when I go forward, really focusing on the variety and the quality of the food that I'm eating so that I am nourishing my body. In particular, if you're looking at it from a performance perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I was just about to get to, is that most times, we're not super mindful, plant-based or not. We're just, until we get into performance related aspects, because when you're working so hard for something, Alan, like you're working so hard in the gym or running, I mean, you're putting in this effort, this work, and you want to get a good return on investment from that, right? You want to be rewarded from that. And that's where I was going to say, that's where the mindfulness comes in with a plant-based diet, where you want to get the most nutritional bang for your buck. And that's why we have this certain approach. Like I write in the book that you've got to list your favorite foods in every category, your 5 favorite fruits, vegetables, legumes, grains, nuts, and seeds, because you want to have those readily available. You want to have them for pre-workout, for post-workout, for snacks. And so you make these mindful decisions. Like, I'm working so hard athletically, and for some people training hours a day, I want to get the most mileage out of my diet as well to support that. And so, and some people just may not be aware of what their favorite foods are. Like maybe they have a couple they go to, like you said, we eat the same kind of 5 or 6 meals. And I totally agree with that. But if you could just add a few more things in there, add some seasonal berries, add some seasonal stone fruit, add some, some other seasonal crops, winter squash or whatever the case is, and have your staples as well. Have your, whether it's brown rice or tempeh or tofu or lentils or black beans or whatever the case is, your oats, have your staples. And then from there, that's where the very particular or specific or mindfulness approach comes. And that's one thing that I like to talk about and write about, is that if you have your staples there, whether they're batch cooking and you have them for the whole week or whatever the case is, you can always call upon that. So when you're craving something, when you're hungry, like sometimes I finish workouts that are, 2 or 3 hours. If I'm doing weights plus cardio plus sauna or whatever the case is, I come home, man, I am hungry, but I've got to make the most intelligent decision. And I can't just say, okay, I want, hurry order something from the local Thai restaurant, which is going to be loaded with oil and all this stuff, because I've got something already prepared at home that I know is going to serve my needs post-workout. It's going to help replenish carbohydrates that were burned through exercise. It's going to help bring in amino acids and repair muscle that was damaged through exercise. It's going to replenish electrolytes lost through sweat and then hydration, those lost through sweat. So we have an entire section on that. I think Matt and I both agree the mindfulness part is really, really key. And that's how you also get into habit building and developing behaviors that, can be something that you can build on. And then it takes the willpower away. Like Matt talks about, when you're trying to follow a really sound nutritional approach for your sport, at first there's a lot of willpower. Like I almost like a burden or a requirement. I have to do this to get this return. And that's for pro athletes and amateur athletes alike. But you do it enough times, you develop these habits, and it takes the guesswork out. So I just wanted to make that early point that I think mindfulness in eating is just not exclusive to plant-based. It's for anybody. Right. And then it just gets accentuated when you get into the athletic world.
Yeah, because you're really trying to nail it. But you guys, like I said, you put a structure out there. And then, Robert, you had that really cool, the R's, so you're going to get 3 seasonal vegetables and, or 3 seasonal fruits. And then you're going to get the kind of your standard things, your apple, your pear, and your orange, because that's always there. I think you called them annuals or
Yeah, like a rule of three of three different things:
threes.
frozen foods, packaged goods, beverages, things that it's designed to add diversity, because diversity is diversity of amino acids, it's diversity of antioxidants, diversity of vitamins, minerals, and other nutritional components, and that's what it's designed to do.
Yeah. And then Matt, you had a whole different approach to shopping. Do you mind going into that a little bit?
Yeah, so I'm much more of a recipe maker. I tend to like cooking. So I will look up recipes. I will almost never go to the store and just, pick out the staples that I'm missing. It's more like I'll make a little bit of list of what the recipes I'm going to make this week are, and then I'll go get those things. But I do have a framework that I've started to apply over the past probably 8 years, begun just eating. Like when I'm eating at my best, I find myself falling into this pattern, which is that I will eat a smoothie in the morning, which is, loaded with nuts and seeds, flax seeds, walnuts, especially, bananas, berries, frozen berries, which is to me some of the best, most antioxidant rich foods you can have. And sometimes some greens in there as well. So I have a smoothie in the morning. If you don't like that, you can do an oatmeal version of that. Some people just don't like smoothies, and that's totally fine. You can do almost the same thing, put the same things in your oatmeal, and now you get an extra serving of whole grains as well. For lunch, I'll do a big giant salad with beans on it, either oil and vinegar for dressing, like a nice extra virgin olive oil, or a nut-based dressing, which will eliminate the oil entirely, which is one less somewhat processed food in your diet. The beans on there are great. Beans are just such a healthy food that if you can get a big serving of those every day, you absolutely should. And putting them on a salad for lunch is one way to kind of ensure that you do. And then finally, for dinner time, I always do a template that's a grain, a green, and a bean. And so many of the foods that we're used to eating turn out to be a grain, a green, and a bean. You can think of tempeh or tofu tacos, or any kind of bean taco, refried beans on a taco. If you have some vegetables on top, you have a grain, and a bean. The grain being the shell, the bean being the filling, and then you got your toppings. A stir fry, you got the rice. You have either beans or tofu if you want that. You've got vegetables on top. So it's very, very easy to make a grain, a green, and a bean. Stews, soups, these often take that form. It doesn't have to be this big, mushy, big bowl of vegan sadness that people think of when they think grain, green, and bean. And so that's simple. Like when I look at the cupboard and I have a bunch of stuff but have not planned a meal, it's very hard to think of a meal. Like even when you have so many choices, it's hard to get your mind to focus in on a meal. But if you can apply a little bit of a constraint that says grain, green, bean, which of those do I have here, and how can I make those do well? Like what condiment can I put in there to make a style of food or a certain cuisine? That structure works really well for me. And what it does is enables me to get the 7 or 10 most important foods. I mentioned beans, berries, nuts and seeds, greens. The foods that I'm trying to get every single day, they very naturally fit into that framework. So that's the one that I will typically eat when I'm at my healthiest.
Yeah. And you've made it a little easier for us in that you've put some recipes in the book. So we've got a head start.
Yes, absolutely. And those recipes, in fact, many of those were contributed by the athletes themselves that we interviewed, which I think is so cool. Because to me, like 10 years ago when Scott Jurek was doing this, he was an ultra endurance athlete. I was an aspiring ultra endurance athlete. And I remember there was a book, Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Body came out, and it had a few of Scott Jurek's recipes in it. Or his grocery list. And then Scott's book came out. And to me, those recipes were like gold back then. I was like, wow, this is a legend in his sport, my sport. And this is exactly what he eats. And he eats a plant-based diet like I do. Like I just could not get enough of having that. So to be able to put 60 recipes in here from elite, pro, Olympian, plant-based athletes, I think that's a really special part of the book. Not to mention the day in the life section at the end, where they all 25 of them list exactly what they eat, like I just did. Yeah. They list how their day looks. And what's interesting about that is there are really very different approaches. Some of them really do focus on the meal planning and the macronutrients, and they make sure they hit those numbers. Some of them, like Dotsie Bausch, Olympic medalist, they just listen to their body. They just and I think as you do this longer and longer, you can get back to the mindfulness thing. You can actually start to just do it naturally without thinking so much about it. Yeah. So it's really neat to see that there are so many ways to make this work, and not just work, but work for extremely high level performance in sports.
Yeah. So it's not like flipping a switch, but figuring your way out, going through it and getting what works for you, finding the foods you like, the food combinations, putting those things together in a way that works. And then over time, you make it better, you make it work better for you. And then particularly with performance athletes, they're always tweaking. You're always tweaking, so because we got to find that half inch, we got to find that half a second, we got to do those things. And that's the same way with the food. And so just taking your time going through it. But this book, like I said, gives a really good structure for someone that's looking to go this way, figuring out how to put it together, how to make it matter, and do it without harming their performance. In fact, probably most likely going to see performance improvement. They're definitely, if they're moving away from a standard American diet, they're moving away from inflammation. And so the recovery and their pain, that's all going to get better with this way of eating. So, Robert, I define wellness as being the healthiest, fittest, and happiest you can be. What are 3 strategies or tactics to get and stay well?
I think you've got to find what your passion is in movement, in exercise. And it doesn't have to be, something super hardcore or that's something that everyone else is already doing. It could be hiking. It could be taking your dog for a walk. It could be being out in nature. But I think you've got to find what you love to do. And when you find your passion, or at least something you're enthusiastic about, you're going to find ways to make it happen. It's less of a burden. It's less of a chore. It's something you look forward to. And I love that you said that, because that's one of my, signature lines too, is to be healthy, happy, and fit. And I think it starts with doing the things, spending the 1,440 minutes we have each day doing what you enjoy. And the more you can smile, the more you can get enjoyment out of your exercise, then I think the better. And that's what I would encourage everyone to do, is to get out there, move, find what you love to do, and just keep doing it.
Okay. Matt, again, I define wellness as being the healthiest, fittest, and happiest you can be. What are 3 strategies or tactics to get and stay well?
Great question. So my first one is, I guess, I'll go from broad to narrow. My broad one is take really small steps when you're creating changes. Typically diving in, overnight change, flipping a switch is not the best answer. It might seem like it for the first 5 days while everything's cranking along and your willpower has not been, taxed yet, but it is getting taxed. And you don't know. And then the day's going to come along when your friends are going out to happy hour or whatever it is, and your perfect setup that this fantasy you've been living, that everything has changed and you're now different, that will come crashing down, because that's what happens. That's what happens with willpower. When it goes, it goes. And then because you've lost your perfectionist fantasy, you now think, well, I'm done. Now it's not worth even having this next meal healthy because I already messed up. So I took 4 years to go from omnivorous to vegan. Nobody has to take that long. But I tend to think that if you take a month to do it, you give yourself maybe a week, like where you're just having your breakfast as plant-based, another week where it's now breakfast and lunch, and so on. Or go try a few weeks where you're plant-based at home and you're still omnivorous out. And then, after that, make it so you're only omnivorous out on the weekends, and so on and so on. These small steps, to me, they give you a chance to learn the new habit. They give your body a chance to adapt. They let you learn how to handle things socially. Obviously, I'm speaking right now about going plant-based, but it could also apply to running, right? You don't have to go out and run a mile 5 times a week to become a runner or to become fit. You can start with 2 minutes a day, and you're not going to get the progress in the first month. It's going to seem like you're really not going anywhere. But if you look a year down the road, I think the person who starts with 2 minutes a day is much more likely to be someone who has now run consistently throughout the whole year at increasing amounts, obviously, because progress is an important part of this. You can't just stagnate at 2 minutes a day. But starting small and having the patience to accept that you're not going to see physical results, but you are building this invisible habit in your head. I think that's probably the most important tip I have for wellness. So that's my general one. A very specific small steps approach for me that I really like is to drink a smoothie and eat a big salad every single day. That's a pretty small step. It might be too big of a step for most people, or not for most, for some people. And if you think that seems like a lot, if you find yourself struggling with even a couple of days of that, then just do one of those things. Just have the smoothie, just have the salad. Do the oatmeal instead of the smoothie if you want. But those 2 meals, to me, they help keep me on track, because if I kind of just mess up, if I go out and have whatever kind of vegan fast food I happen to have, if later I get back to have a salad, like it just kind of gets me back on track. So I like that as my small one. And then my very most specific habit, this is just something that has worked for me, paying attention to my sleep, like getting a sleep tracker. I'm not really into trackers and data and stuff like that, but I've realized in the past few months that paying attention to my sleep, it's one of those habits that I think of it as like an anchor habit. It sort of pulls everything else in the right direction, just like the smoothie and the salad. Like I said, once I started paying attention to my sleep, I started paying attention to how I ate and how I drank in the hours before I'd go to bed. So suddenly there was this benefit. I started noticing that when I worked out in the day, I would sleep better. So then I have this extra reason to actually work out in the day. And so it's just one of those things. It's like a little game. And if I'm trying to maximize how well I sleep, it turns out that I'm also maximizing how well I am living throughout my day. So maybe sleep isn't it for everybody, but if you can find that anchor habit, that one that just pulls you to make the right choices, then that can be life-changing. So it's been sleep for me, but look for yours.
Excellent. Thank you for that, both of you. Well, this is episode 493.
Wow.
So
congratulations. That's awesome.
So the show notes are going to be at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/493. But if you guys want me to send somebody somewhere and have links in the show notes for that, where would you like that to be?
They can go to my site's at nomeatathlete.com. Robert, what's your site's domain?
Veganbodybuilding.com.
And we will have a dedicated book page at book.nomeatathlete.com if they want to go there and see a bunch of endorsements and some more about what's in the book.
Okay. Well, the book is called The Plant-Based Athlete, and the subtitle in this is A Game-Changing Approach to Peak Performance. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot from the book because, as I said, I've always known that endurance athletes do very, very well with the vegan diet, plant-based diets. But this was kind of the first time I've seen how broad and how wide the performance improvements can be across all these different disciplines. And you've got the case studies in there. You've got the athletes themselves speaking to how they've done this, and sharing their own recipes and how they eat in a given day. So you can't ask for much more than that. This is a great book, guys. Thank you so much for being a part of 40 Plus Fitness.
Awesome. Thank you, Alan. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Appreciate the opportunity today.
Welcome back, Raz.
Hey, Alan, what a fascinating interview, especially when you're talking about endurance athletes. That's kind of my thing, but the plant-based endurance athlete is pretty amazing.
Yeah. And I knew, when I started reading it, and Matt is an endurance athlete. And of course, some of the people, a lot of the people they profiled, the Rich Rolls and those guys that are, they're just diehard vegan athletes, and they're endurance athletes. And you look at them and say, yeah, they look like vegans physically. But then, it's power lifters and it's bodybuilders and it's all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, you can. And I think that's really kind of the magic of what I came away with all of this was you can be vegan and be a bodybuilder. You can be vegan and eat keto. You can do those things. Now, is it the easiest way to do it? And the short answer would be no. Yeah. And is it the optimal way to do it? And that, I think the jury's still out because we just don't have enough of them high enough up in a sport. Now, Arnold Schwarzenegger was on the Game Changer documentary. It was on Netflix. It's probably still out there. And, he basically said this is the way he's eating now. It's more vegetarian or vegan. I'm not sure exactly which one, but he's in that realm of a plant-based diet. And he believes that's the way it should be. That's the way people should be eating. Now, would Arnold Schwarzenegger be Arnold Schwarzenegger if he had been a vegan when he was 18 years old, or 17 years old when he was coming over to the United States at the very beginning? And I don't know. I don't know that he could have accomplished what he accomplished being vegan and vegetarian. Now, you can get your protein, but they're eating a ton of extra calories and fiber to get that done, but it's doable. And I think that's what they've proved in their book. And, what they might find is with what's happening with all of these vegan and vegetarian athletes is, are they living longer? Because a lot of the, muscular athletes, really muscular athletes that you see, offensive linemen in college football, or in pro football, or you see the bodybuilders or the pro wrestlers, a lot of those folks, and a lot of it's lifestyle. It's not necessarily that they just put on so much muscle or what they did or what they ate, but these athletes are trying to do this not just for performance, but for longevity. And so that's their eating style, is looking at it from a health and a performance perspective. They don't want to sacrifice the performance, but they want to make sure they're not harming their health. So it will be interesting to see how these athletes fare, because it's not uncommon for bodybuilders to die younger. Professional wrestlers, powerlifters, they get big hearts. They don't eat well. They pack on a ton of muscle and often fat in the off season. And so it's just, there's not bodybuilding and powerlifting and those, they're not healthy sports. You're not getting into that for health. And in a sense, a lot of times ultra marathoners are not getting into it for health. There's a limit. If you just ran, even if it was just like 3 miles a day or 5 miles a day, your body would be fine. You'd be healthy. a lot of times when you push yourself too hard, and it's a thing, is that you can push yourself past the point of health. And so that would be my only concern is if these athletes are still physically pushing themselves there, does this mitigate some of that health risk that they would have had if they were meat eaters?
That's the interesting question to ask. Yeah, is all these plants that we tend to eat, salads and vegetables, and all these legumes and beans. They all have some nutrients in them that are so important for our day-to-day life. And getting the right combination of them could very well support our endurance activities, whether it's running or biking or swimming or powerlifting. I can imagine. But the one thing about diets that's really fascinating is that I look at it as a fueling strategy. I eat certain foods because they agree with me and they support what I'm going to do, athletically speaking. But people with a nut allergy, for example, no matter how great walnuts and pecans are for you, they can't simply eat them. So there must be an alternative for that person, or somebody with a lactose issue or a gluten issue. Our bodies, just because you want to eat something, may not tolerate it well. And so the point is just to find what eating style works best for you. And I'm amazed by people like Scott Jurek and Rich Roll and some of the other endurance runners that can live on a vegan diet. Clearly that's working for them in some way or another. So yeah, I read a lot of it. It's a trend right now, right in our running community. A lot of people are turning to more plant-based diets, and there's something to it, obviously.
Yeah. Well, and like we mentioned in the show, it's nutritionally dense food. And so, getting your body the vitamins and the minerals that you need, that you might not be able to get from a full carnivore diet.
Right.
So, making sure you're doing that. But the end all be all, and, I mentioned this a couple of times on there, is the reason I think that vegans and vegetarians tend to do better health-wise, and they say it over and over when they talk about their studies and it's in their books, is they're eating whole food.
Amen to that.
And so,
yeah.
And they equate eating omnivore as a standard American diet. So to them, there's no difference. They don't look at red meat and processed meat and say it's any different. It's meat,
right?
And red, so they don't look at it different. If they're going to do a study about the health effects of meat, they're going to just say, "Do you eat these?" And they're going to include the two together. Now you could come back and say, "Well, I only eat grass-fed, grass-finished beef, pastured chicken, pastured pork, and under these circumstances." But nobody breaks the science down to that level of detail. And even if they did, most of this is just what people say they're eating,
right?
And not necessarily what they're eating. So, we've got these athletes now, they're going through this process, and if they stick with it for the long haul, because there's a lot of vegans that fall off the wagon. There's a lot of people that go whole food that fall off the wagon. There's a lot of keto people that fall off the wagon. So, if they stick with it, then we might come up with some stories, of course it'll be anecdotal stories, but some stories that demonstrate that way of eating is sustainable for the long term. It works for their performance. It works for their health and longevity, because that's why they're doing it. They're doing it because they believe that's the healthiest way to eat. For many of them, it's also an ethical concerns.
Sure.
But almost everybody that I've talked to, and particularly with Robert and Matt, it was really about longevity and health.
Yeah. And you mentioned whole foods. I think that's the essential key to this part of the formula, is whether you're eating a whole vegan type of food or a whole keto kind of food. The point is getting real foods. Oreos, I guess, are vegan, but they certainly don't have any of the nutrition that you need on a daily basis. So, just making sure that you're eating a healthy, actual nutritious item, and not going to the chips and the pretzels and the cookies that just because they're vegan, it counts, I guess. But you still need to eat the nutrients you need to eat. But the other point about diets that I'd like to bring up too is that sustainable is such a slippery slope of a word for me, because I just trained, for example, for a 50-mile race. What if I decide that I'm going to focus on a triathlon? Or what if I decide to do bodybuilding as my next big challenge, then I will probably change the way I eat to address that activity. So, whether people stick to a vegan or a keto or any diet in between, as long as it's supporting your health and your activities, then I would say go with what is working for you in that moment. I don't get hung up on being sustainable, being vegan to the end of the days or being keto for the end of days. We go through these trends in life, things happen. So eat how it best supports your health in that moment is my point.
Yeah, because in the end, food serves like three purposes. Okay. The
Yes.
first purpose is it's nourishment and fuel for your body. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Your body needs certain oils and fats. It needs certain
Yes.
amino acids. And in general, we tend to do a little better if there's some fiber involved.
Mm-hmm.
So those are kind of the bare requirements, and then getting the vitamins and minerals that we need. That's our nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing about food is if you do it right, it's delicious.
Yes.
And so no, if you eat Twinkies all the time, a strawberry isn't going to taste very sweet.
Right.
But a strawberry is actually very sweet, as are carrots and tomatoes and beets. Those are very sweet.
Mm-hmm.
Even a sweet potato. I can put cinnamon just flat on a sweet potato and eat it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to add sugar, which you go into a restaurant and you order a sweet potato, all their cinnamon is going to be mixed with sugar, pre-mixed.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they get it. And I don't want the sugar. So, I end up eating it plain or just with butter. But my base point is you should enjoy your food. So you shouldn't be this, it's this horrible, I have to eat this 5-pound salad every day.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's not how it should be. It should be enjoyable foods that you find appealing, that are bringing all the different things, the textures and the tastes and all the things that you like, and avoiding the textures and tastes that you don't like.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final bit is we use food for social things, for celebrations, for parties, for going out, for eating with somebody has a special meaning to us. I think some people go a little too far with that, and it's like, okay, I got to have the cake, and we got to do this for this party, and we got to do that, and the food goes a little off the rails for some of these celebrations. But that said, sitting down and having a meal with someone you care about is an important part of life.
Mm-hmm.
Having those conversations over a dinner table with your family is an important part of life. And those are not moments to be missed out on because, they're eating pizza and I can't sit at the table while they're eating pizza because I might want a slice of pizza. So I'm going to eat in the other room.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not tempted by the pizza. And it's like, well, one, you got to investigate your relationship with food. And then two, what is it intrinsically about the pizza that's the problem?
Yeah.
And would having a piece of pizza actually ruin your life?
Yep. As long as it agrees with you, I always go back to allergies because I have them. So, as long as that pizza agrees with you and it's not going to start a cascading way of terrible dieting and eating over the next few days, then enjoy it. Enjoy that family time, enjoy that celebration or that birthday cake or whatever it is, as long as it agrees with you and just get back to it the next day.
Yeah. And if you want to make it keto, just rake the cheese and meat over and vegetables over into your bowl and in your plate and then toss the crust into the dog's bowl. I mean,
there you go. Yep. Your dog will be happy.
Yeah. Dog's happy. You're happy. You're sitting with the family. All good.
Absolutely.
All right, Rachel. Well, we'll talk next week then.
Sounds great. Take care.
Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, we meet Dr. Sadi Raza and discuss COVID-19 health concerns besides COVID-19. Until then, have a happy and healthy week.